Hope your work week is off to a good start. You're watching the Daily Report for Monday, March 28th. I'm Min Sun-hee. There's been a notable drop in Korea's COVID-19 tally today, prompting widespread belief that the worst of the Omicron wave is over. We start now with the broader pandemic coverage. I have Kwon So standing by. So just start us off then.
Sunny, the widespread belief seems to be apparent in the figures. Let's take a look at how many cases were tallied as of 12 a.m. this Monday. That's around 187,200. So for the first time in weeks, this number has dropped to below 200,000. And if we go over now to our graph, we see it is a plunge by around 130,000 from the day before, but also marks an on-week drop from last Monday by almost 22,000. Now, on our map, we do see that we've got no place in the country that has reported a six-digit figure this Monday, with Gyeonggi-do province the highest figure at a little above 50,000, followed by some 34,000 in the capital Seoul, and Incheon and Gyeongsangnam-do province are other places with five-digit figures, while the rest of the nation is seeing four-digit numbers in daily infections. However, Korea has now accumulated more than 12 million cases of the coronavirus. Also, the death toll has surpassed 15,000. Meanwhile, the number of patients in severe or critical condition, that number now stands at an all-time high at 1,273. Now, as it was the weekend, not many people have received their vaccinations, so with just a double-digit figure of people who got their first or second shots on Sunday, but a little more people got their booster shots, 464 on Sunday. That's now equivalent to 63.6% of the nation's population that have received an extra shot. Now, meanwhile, there's some positive news on the global front, as for the first time in quite a long time, the number of daily infections posted in the span of 24 hours as of noon Korea time, that is, has dropped to below 1 million. And we've got a little over 2,300 people who have lost their lives due to the virus in the past day. And those are the general updates I have for now, but I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
All right, so thank you for those tallies. Up next, our Choi Min-jung joins me now with more domestic coverage, especially in light of the tangible decline in our daily tally on this Monday. Min-jung, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Sunny.
Right, so let's start with a few words on today's tally, Min-jung.
Right, South Korea reported fewer than 200,000 cases for the first time in more than 3 weeks. Health authorities said this morning that the Omicron outbreak is now trending downward after passing its peak. Let's take a listen.
We're seeing a gradual downtrend for the first time in 11 weeks after reaching our Omicron peak. Last week, we saw a peak daily high of 490,000, but on this Monday, the figure has dropped to 187,000. We've seen a decline of 22,000 cases on week as well.
We usually tend to see lower figures on Mondays as fewer people get tested for COVID-19 over the weekend. But we will have to wait and see if cases will remain on this downward trend later in the week.
Right, Min-jung, I would have to agree right there. Now, while the number of daily infections, Min-jung, is on a downward trend, those of severe cases and fatalities, I believe, are prompting much concern.
That's right, Sunny, and it's because those figures you mentioned are trending in the opposite direction despite the fall in our daily infections. On this Monday, we've seen an all-time high in the number of severely ill patients at just above 1,270 and another 287 additional deaths. Health Minister Kwon Duk-cheol said that these figures could peak in the next 2 to 3 weeks, calling on the public to stay vigilant. It's especially concerning for seniors aged 60 and above, as the infection rate in this age group is rising quickly. They accounted for around 10% of all infections in early February, but as of Sunday, the figure has doubled to nearly 21%. This age bracket also accounts for 85% of patients in critical condition and 95% of deaths. This is why health authorities are reminding the elderly once again to get their booster shots.
Also, further complicating Korea's situation, Min-jung, here is the rising number of stealth Omicron cases. Tell us more.
Right, stealth Omicron is spreading viciously around the world, and Korea is no exception. Last week, stealth Omicron, officially known as the BA2 variant, accounted for around 56% of infections, and it has now become the most dominant strain here in Korea. So far, there is no evidence to suggest that the BA.2 variant is linked to more severe health outcomes than the original Omicron strain. But what's concerning is its infection rate, as the subvariant has been found to be 30% more transmissible than Omicron. In consideration of this finding, some experts believe Korea's Omicron wave could possibly last longer, similar to what's happening in many European countries.
Right, Minjung, European countries. And speaking about that, let's turn to Soa now for more details about the situation over in Europe, Soa.
Yes, Sunny, the dominance of the stealth Omicron, or the BA.2, the subvariant of Omicron overseas, is what officials here are closely monitoring, as the rebound in cases there could foreshadow a longer than expected COVID-19 wave here in the country, as Minjung earlier mentioned as well. So around a third of European countries have been seeing resurgences in the past week, apparently fueled by the stealth Omicron, including Germany, France, Greece, the UK, and Ireland. Now, according to Ireland's health department, the highly transmissible BA.2 subvariant accounts for almost 95% of cases in Ireland, with its surge having coincided with the near exclusion of all other variants. It only made up some 4% of cases in the third week of January, which was when most virus restrictions were lifted. France in the past week reported an increase in weekly COVID-19 hospitalizations, with cases ticking up since early this month. The 7-day average stands at above 110,000, which is similar to what the nation tallied on Sunday local time. And in Germany, which has been reporting the highest number of infections in Europe recently, stealth Omicron accounts for more than 70% of cases, with health authorities urging the unvaccinated to get immunized, saying there is a high chance they could be infected in the coming days. Now, European countries, meanwhile, are not the only ones that are affected, as the BA.2's presence is growing in countries like the US, Australia, as well as China.
Right, and with regard to China, so mounting caseloads there have led to the shutdown of Shanghai, I hear.
Right, and that would be the largest ever citywide lockdown in the country since the pandemic broke out in Wuhan. Officials announced on Sunday to lock down the city of some 25 million people in 2 stages over the span of 9 days. During that period, authorities aim to conduct massive COVID-19 screenings. The city was to be divided into 2 parts, with the Huangpu River, which flows through the city, to serve as a boundary. With that, testing for some will start this Monday until April 1st, for others from April 1st to the 5th. Shanghai recently also started using rapid antigen tests following recent approval for official use.
We will combine the 2 different screening methods of nucleic acid testing and antigen testing. Starting today, we will conduct nucleic acid testing for the key areas in the outbreak and carry out antigen testing for non-key areas.
The financial hub had so far tried to avoid a lockdown over economic concerns, but record high COVID-19 cases have led authorities to go along with China's zero COVID policy. Shanghai posted another record high in coronavirus infections for the 2nd straight day on Sunday local time, with 3,450 asymptomatic and 50 symptomatic cases.
I see, so. And moving forward, back to you, Minjung, on the treatment front, what's the latest with regard to the rollout of Gabrielle or molnupiravir here in Korea, Minjung?
Well, around 20,000 courses of the pill were distributed to designated hospitals and pharmacies on Saturday. One dispensary in Seoul received enough courses to treat 20 people, but said it didn't fill many prescriptions as of yet. And this could be because Gabrielle is recommended as an alternative to Paxlovid for COVID-19 patients who cannot take Pfizer's drug due to health issues. Gabrielle was shown to lower the rate of hospitalization and death by 30% compared to 90% for Paxlovid, but experts still say it could be effective in those with underlying liver or kidney conditions. And the introduction of Gabrielle is expected to ease the current shortage of COVID-19 pills, as some 7,000 people are being prescribed with oral medication each day. To tackle the shortage, officials are planning to bring in 184,000 courses of oral drugs by the end of this month and another 276,000 courses in April. And these will include both Paxlovid and Gabrielle shipments.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, so on the vaccination front, I understand second booster shots may be available available over in the U.S. soon?
Right. Related discussions have been ongoing, and now reports do say that the U.S. FDA may give the green light for second booster shots for people aged 50 and above as early this week. And that's according to the New York Times, citing people familiar with the discussions. The CDC would then follow up with its own guidelines. Health officials have been hotly debating whether a fourth dose of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine is needed for the most elderly population, as experts remain divided on its efficiency. But the Biden administration reportedly is looking to provide more protection with an additional booster shot due to fears COVID-19 cases could surge again before autumn. Now, meanwhile, regarding that efficiency regarding the second booster shot, Israel has a new study which says actually people who had a second booster shot had a 78% lower fatality rate than people who only got a first booster shot from the Pfizer vaccine. And also, meanwhile, in regards to the fourth shot here in Korea, as of Sunday, around 2,000 more people have received an additional booster shot, and that's now a total of around 252,000. And here in Korea, subject to those second booster shots are people 18 and above who are immunocompromised, or people at nursing homes, nursing hospitals, or other facilities at high risk. And also regarding the vaccination figures here for those aged 60 and above in general, 95.7% are now fully vaccinated, and those aged 60 and above who have gotten at least one booster shot, that percentage now stands at 89%.
Right, that is good to know also. Meanwhile, Minjung, with regard to vaccinations for children aged 5 to 11, how does their uptake elsewhere, perhaps, compare to the mixed response here in Korea?
Well, Sunny, vaccinations for children aged 5 to 11 will begin this Thursday in Korea amid heated debate over their safety. But there are countries that have been inoculating this age group much earlier than South Korea. The U.S. started doing so in November last year, and so far more than 30% of young children in this bracket have received at least one dose. It did start off slow, but has been picking up pace. And the majority of the reported side effects were mild, including fevers and headaches. According to the CDC, vaccines are relatively less effective in preventing infections among these children compared to other age groups, possibly because they are given smaller doses. But medical experts are still recommending the shots as they reduce the rate of hospitalization by 74%.
I see. All right, Minjung, thank you very much for your coverage, and so are you as well. Thank you. See you on Tuesday.
See you on Tuesday, Sunny.
Intelligence authorities from Seoul and Washington have shared their analysis of Pyongyang's most recent missile test launch. Their findings appear to cast doubt on North Korea's claims about its missile capabilities. Our Kim Hyo-sun explains.
South Korean and U.S. intel agencies believe last week's ICBM launch by North Korea involved a Hwasong-15 missile. According to multiple sources, the Hwasong-15 was disguised to look like the newer and larger Hwasong-17, which is dubbed by watchers as, quote, a monster missile. The Allies' joint analysis was based on input from intelligence assets and shows the missile had two engine nozzles, like the Hwasong-15 the North test fired back in 2017. The Hwasong-17 has 4 nozzles. The analysis also showed the engine combustion time of the first stage rocket was similar to that of the Hwasong-15. However, military authorities noted the missile fired last Thursday flew a similar trajectory to the Hwasong-15 test fired 4 years ago, but at a higher altitude and for a longer distance. South Korea's military intelligence also believes the launch video later released by the regime was actually a patchwork of earlier footage from the previous tests of Hwasong-17 variations. On a related note, North Korea may be preparing a nuclear test as it seems to be working on a shortcut to a tunnel at its nuclear test site in Punggye-ri. If the North goes ahead with the provocation, it would be Pyongyang's first known nuclear test in 4.5 years. According to South Korean government sources Sunday, it has detected signs of the North restoring Tunnel 3 in the mountainous northeastern region. Against such a backdrop, pundits say the regime may test a small tactical nuclear weapon that can be loaded onto ballistic missiles sometime around April 25th, a key national holiday commemorating the founding of the Korean People's Revolutionary Army. Kim Yeo-sun, Arirang News.
In other news, delegates from Ukraine and Russia are soon poised to meet in Turkey for more dialogue aimed at diffusing tensions in Eastern Europe. This comes amid the tragic civilian toll of Kremlin's brutal campaign in Ukraine. Our Song Yoo-jin has more.
It's been over a month since Russia launched a full-scale attack on Ukraine. Over the course of that time, Moscow and Kyiv held 4 rounds of peace talks aiming for a ceasefire, but which all ended without a major breakthrough. The two countries are now looking toward fresh talks in Turkey. A Turkish presidential spokesperson told CNN that the talks are expected to be held in Istanbul on Tuesday. However, that date may change as a negotiator from Ukraine earlier took to social media to say that the meeting will run from Monday to Wednesday. During the talks, Ukraine could lay out the possibility of neutrality, as well as coming to a compromise over the status of the eastern Donbas region, which is controlled by Russian-backed separatists. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke of the possibility in a video call with Russian journalists.
Security guarantees and neutrality, a non-nuclear status for our state. We are ready to go for it. This is the most important point. It was the main point for the Russian Federation as far as I can remember, and, if I remember correctly, this is why they started the war.
Meanwhile, over in the battered country, one survivor from the theater bombing in Mariupol 2 weeks ago told a local media outlet, Sunday local time, that the attack resulted in the deaths of numerous pregnant women and infants, though the exact number was not given. This was because the shelling struck the area of the building that was being used to shelter mostly women and babies. The survivor also estimated that at least 300 people would have lost their lives, matching the preliminary death toll announced by city officials. And Ukrainians are not only facing the risk of death, but also deportation to Russia. Citing data from Russia's National Center for Defense Management, Ukraine's human rights ombudswoman claimed Monday local time that Russian forces deported more than 19,600 Ukrainians, including some 3,000 children from the separatist regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. However, she added the actual number is expected to be higher as Russian troops are kidnapping civilians all across the country. Ukraine's foreign ministry previously announced that a maximum of 400,000 Ukrainians may have been forcibly taken to Russia. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
On the local front, findings for roughly the first quarter show a significant surge in inbound shipments of energy products to the country. Our Min Soo-kyun has more on these findings and their implications.
South Korea is spending more on its energy imports this year. According to the Korea Customs Service on Monday, imports of oil, natural gas, and coal between January 1st and March 20th stood at $38.5 billion, up 85.4% from a year earlier. Crude oil rose nearly 70% on year, while natural gas surged 92% and coal jumped more than 150%. The rise in energy imports was mostly attributed to an increase in global commodity prices following the global economic recovery from the pandemic, as well as Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia is one of the largest producers of oil and natural gas, accounting for about 12% of the world's crude oil and around 70% of its natural gas. Market watchers say that soaring energy prices are not only believed to squeeze the profits of local companies, but are also expected to burden the country's overall trade balance and consumer prices. As of March 20th, South Korea so far posted a trade deficit of $5.98 billion, a sharp shift from a $6.7 billion trade surplus recorded over the same period last year. Meanwhile, in February, consumer prices hit 3.7%, growing more than 3% for the 5th consecutive month. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
On a bright note, Korea's medical arena is making significant advances aimed at prompt diagnosis of Parkinson's disease to allow for early intervention in hopes of delaying its course. Our Han Sung-woo tells us how and why.
Parkinson's begins long before the first tremor. And by the time the symptoms are obvious, it's often too late to hope for any meaningful change. That's why the fight against this incurable disease depends so much on detecting symptoms early to potentially slow its progression. Professor Byun Sun-jung from the Catholic University of Korea, Uijeongbu St. Mary's Hospital has filed a patent application for a unique way to accomplish that. AI-based analysis of the gait or walk of someone at high risk, using an insertable shoe sole with sensors.
Data from 75 people with Parkinsonian symptoms, along with 82 healthy individuals without symptoms, for a grand total of nearly 8,700 steps, all with their own diverse gait indicators, were incorporated into the algorithm I developed.
Byun says it boasts a 98.1% accuracy rate in differentiating between healthy older adults and those suffering from Parkinsonian symptoms, and an 83.2% accuracy rate in distinguishing whether those symptoms are vascular or neurodegenerative. The results fuel hopes that gait analysis could drastically save patients' medical bills by eliminating the need for brain scans until when they become absolutely necessary.
Differentiating between these patients using conventional methods is quite a struggle. It's practically impossible for doctors to run MRIs or PET scans on them every time the need arises.
Without even knowing I had Parkinson's, I had MRI scans on my brain, neck, and waist. And the one for my brain cost me nearly $1,200.
According to research done by Professor Lee Ji-young at the Seoul National University Borame Medical Center, Parkinson's may one day also be detected by observing structural changes in the retina. Lee, along with several co-authors, recently published the work in Nature Reviews Neurology, writing that the progressive thinning of the retina in certain areas provides potential biomarkers for early diagnosis.
The orthodox theory is that in the end, the layer of optic nerves known as the ganglion cell complex shrinks to the point that its total thickness is greatly reduced. Clinically speaking, the thinning correlates with how severe the Parkinsonian symptoms are.
She believes that retinal imaging will eventually offer a safe and scientifically significant solution to the over-reliance on brain scans.
Commercializing the method would give prospective patients a non-invasive and radiation-free way to detect the disease. For the medical community, it would signify a tremendous advance in health science, the confirmation of a pathophysiological mechanism between the retina and the brain.
Korea has one of the world's fastest aging populations, and with longer life expectancy, Parkinson's will only become more common, making early detection of the disease vital for more sustainable long-term care. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. China on Sunday held a memorial event at the crash site of the China Eastern Airline flight MU-5735 to mourn the loss of the 132 people on the flight. Attendees at the memorial included Chinese State Councilor Wang Yong and rescue team members who observed a moment of silence for the 123 passengers and 9 crew members. The memorial event comes a day after authorities confirmed the deaths of all 132 people on board the ill-fated plane. Meanwhile, the plane's second black box was recovered Sunday morning as search and rescue operations entered their 7th day. The first black box, believed to be the cockpit voice recorder, was recovered last Wednesday, bringing investigators a significant step closer to finding the cause of the tragedy. Yemen's Houthi rebels announced a 3-day ceasefire with the Saudi-led coalition on Saturday, voicing their commitment to a permanent truce if the coalition ends airstrikes and withdraws their forces. The ceasefire agreement includes the suspension of all ground battles across all front lines. The Houthis also proposed a prisoner swap deal, which would include the brother of the Yemeni president. The Houthi proposal came hours after coalition forces launched heavy airstrikes on the rebels' vital military and economic sites in retaliation for missile and drone strikes against oil facilities in Saudi Arabia last week. El Salvador's Congress on Sunday approved emergency powers to temporarily suspend some constitutional protections after the country recorded a sharp rise in homicides linked to criminal gangs. On Saturday alone, police reported a total of 62 homicides, the highest daily toll so far this century. The emergency measures include restrictions on free assembly and the inviolability of correspondence and communications, as well as an extension of administrative detention. The surge in homicides comes despite a steady decline in such figures since President Nayib Bukele took office in 2019. 이승재, Arirang News.
Interest in pets has been growing amid the pandemic as these furry friends and others provide their human companions with the strength to endure COVID-19. To take a look.
They say dogs are men's best friend, and data about pet ownership and how Koreans feel about their pets suggest that might be true, especially amid the COVID-19. According to online big data analysis on how COVID-19 changed pet culture in South Korea, the number of mentions of the words pet culture has risen 27% compared to 2019. There are also twice as many positive opinions about companion animals and their welfare in the media as there used to be. As quarantine and social restrictions forced people to spend more time at home, many households have welcomed pets into their family and started to appreciate them all the more.
This is my dog, Tebeg, and we're at a pet fair right now. As you can see, I'm not the only one who decided to take a furry friend to take a look around this event.
Around 150 companies participated in the event, showcasing a variety of products such as pet food, supplies, apparel, and accessories. Even pet healthcare services were introduced to visitors, reflecting a national trend of people paying more attention on their pets' quality of life and wellness care.
저희도 포메라니언이어서 털이나 쓸개골 위주로 좀 많이 건강을 좀 해주려고 하고 있어요. 반려견은 또 이제 가족이니까 또 그래가지고 직접 이렇게 다 해서 하게 되는 것 같아요.
Pet parenthood is getting more expensive, but many owners are still willing to splurge.
근데 저한테 줄이는 거 들어가는 비용을 좀 줄이고 물루한테 조금 많이 쓰는 것 같아요. 가족 같아서 들어가는 비용은 전혀 아깝지가 않아서 저는 괜찮아요.
One survey showed 86% of the respondents think of their pet as part of the family, and 72% are willing to spend extra to pamper their pooches. By all accounts, the industry continues to see strong growth. The pet products market posted $2.7 billion in revenue for 2020 and is expected to total $4.9 billion by 2027.
이러한 반려동물 산업이 과거에는 사료나 분양, 이런 용품 같은 고전적인 산업이 비중이 컸다고 생각한다면 최근에는 건강이나 의료, 이런 3차 산업 영역까지도 비중이 커지고 있습니다.
According to the Korea Pet Report 2021, over 14 million Koreans live with a four-legged or finned companion. That's nearly a quarter of the entire population.
In fact, pet adoptions in Korea surged during the pandemic as people in quarantine felt lonely and stressed and sought companionship.
밖에 나가면 사람이랑 좀 접촉하기가 좀 부담스러운데 반려견은 집에 가만히 이렇게 같이 있으니까 접촉하는 것도 부담스럽지 않고 심심하지도 않고 가족 일부처럼 좋은 것 같아요.
하루에 2번 이상 산책을 가게 돼서 저희도 부지런하게 됐고 제일 중요한 거는 이제 서로 위안을 받고 즐겁게 살 수 있다 그런 것 같아요.
In a survey, 91.6% of Korean pet owners said their pet helped them overcome COVID-19. As for the US, 92% of pet owners in the country said they believed that their animals have boosted their well-being during the pandemic, staving off loneliness. One study suggested Americans spent a record high $99 billion last year on all things pet, due to a major spike in pet adoptions and families spending more time at home with their pets. The industry experienced unprecedented growth last year. But experts point out more people who got pets during the pandemic are dumping them as the world inches back to normal.
정부에서도 그렇고 민간 쪽에서도 지속적으로 이러한 유기동물 예방을 위한 캠페인도 펼치고 올바른 반려동물 문화 정착이 더욱 절실한 앞으로 더 필요하지 않을까 이런 생각이 듭니다.
It is illegal, a criminal offense, to abandon an animal here in South Korea. As the number of households raising pets continues to rise, we should all think carefully about what it takes to be a responsible pet owner. This has been Chun Sung-chu and Taebek.
In our panel session on this Monday, we delve into Korea's Omicron outbreak, including its current trend and related response efforts. For more, I have Professor Kim Moon-gyu from Yonsei University. Professor Kim, it's good to have you here.
Great to be here again.
I also have Professor David Kwak joining this session virtually from the university, Suncheon University, that is. Professor Kwak, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Good afternoon, Sunny.
Right, Professor Kim, it appears that our daily tally is on a steady decline. Do you believe we're past our peak?
Well, I always look at the 7-day average per population data, and it took a peak on 17th of March, which is about 10 days before, to the point of 7,800 something per million, almost 8,000. And now it's about 6,800. So I think it's declining already for more than a week. And it is almost the same level of the peak of Denmark and a month ago. And if we follow the pattern of Denmark, I think we're going to see a decline for the rest of the time. But we have to look at other countries like UK, France, and Israel. They had a peak, and about 2 months later, they have a resurgence. And maybe it is because of this stealth Omicron, also called as BA2. And if we look at Hong Kong's data, they say about 90% of their COVID-19 is BA2. And this BA2 is about 40 to 50% more transmissible. So it's spreading very rapidly. If you look at the reproduction number, Omicron BA1 is about 8 or 9, but BA2, stealth Omicron, is about 12. If you have this kind of number, it's almost like an airborne disease. So it will infect everybody who didn't have this immunity. And Germany has about 50% of cases with BA2, and USA about 10%. But their death rate is almost same as Omicron, so it's low, thankfully. I think Korea is about 56%, so I think if we look at the data of the severe cases, I hope that it will not rise much. Vaccine efficacy is almost same, BA1, BA2. And if you have been infected with BA1, that means you may have a strong protection against BA2. So what we have this kind of increase in those countries like Israel and something, I think they ease the social distancing. They are not wearing the mask so well, and they have more social mixing together. And I think many people were infected with previous variants such as alpha, beta, and delta. So waning of immunity might be another factor, but I don't think that's going to be a problem for Korea because almost everybody is infected with Omicron and stealth Omicron.
Right. And Professor Kwak, despite the decline in Korea's daily tally, its numbers of critical cases and fatalities remain quite high, as my colleague Min Jung mentioned earlier. What should be done to better address this unfortunate scenario?
Well, we can only expect it to actually go even higher from this point on because it hasn't exactly been 2 weeks since the peak of the wave, which we're hoping that we're passing through. So we would, and this is just my personal opinion, that we would have to heavily focus on protecting those who are vulnerable. And I thought about this, how we can accomplish that. We're currently having about slightly less than 2 million of people or so currently contained in their homes being taken care at-home treatment. But those include everybody who's been diagnosed with confirmation of COVID-19 cases. I think we may need to change that scheme and focus even more on only those who are more vulnerable, such as those who are elderly or who are with underlying diseases, because at the current state, the doctor who is responsible to take care of all the home treatment cared patients, they're pretty much taking care of all the patients regardless of their vulnerability to the disease. If we can sort of shift the scheme so that these same medical human resources can focus even better on those who are more vulnerable, I think we can probably take a more aggressive approach to minimize further happenings of severe cases and possibly death even. But also in that sense, I think it'll also be it might be an idea to designate certain hospitals to only take care of people who are more vulnerable, such as the elderlies. We currently have some spaces available throughout the hospitals nationwide, but if we are able to, let's say, designate more numerous hospitals to solely take care of even mildly infected patients who are vulnerable, I think we'll be able to sort of catch these people from abruptly falling severely ill among those who are more likely to have such cases. So for example, if a hospital was, let's say, taking care of anybody who's above 50 years of age instead of everybody who's having the disease, they'll be more likely to catch more numbers of more severe cases and whatnot. So I think, once again, I iterate, this is only my personal opinion, but to minimize further deaths and further severe cases, I think we need to think about how we can focus our energy and our resources to only those who are vulnerable.
Right. And staying with you, Professor Kwak, Korea now has a second antiviral pill to fight COVID-19. What are your prospects with regard to the role of Lagevrio in curbing Omicron, or critical cases, that is?
Well, both the medical pills that we are currently equipped with have its pros and cons. For example, molnupiravir, as we have talked about numerously, is limited in a sense that it only showed about 30% of efficacy in its preventing of deaths and severe cases. But it doesn't have as the side effects or the limitations that the Paxlovid has in that regard. It can also be given to patients who are concomitantly taking other types of medications that are metabolized through liver, as opposed to Paxlovid is kind of limited in a sense that it is limited only to the patients who are either not concurrently taking liver metabolized medication, or those people who that would have to stop taking their original medication while they start on the Paxlovid. So in that sense, because we have to sort of balance and match in its use of all people, addition of molnupiravir to the only equipment that we currently have, Paxlovid, I think will be a great addition. But because it also has its own limitations, it being carcinogenic for one, I think we have to expand our view and explore other types of alternative methods that we can also use to protect people. I think, for instance, as Dr. Coetzee mentioned a couple of weeks before on our show, starting to use corticosteroids much early on in its progress in the people will also help minimizing the symptoms. I don't think it'll help in preventing death rates or severity rates, as prior studies have proven so, but at least it could contain the symptoms minimally so that we could better focus on those people who are already with severe symptoms. Number two, we have to focus on the fact that these elderly generations who are more vulnerable to the disease can abruptly and quite suddenly fall ill even after being discharged from hospitals of their stay with COVID-19. So we have to, I think, extend the time of period where we have to keenly monitor these more vulnerable people. So instead of just monitoring them for 10 or 7 to 14 days that are currently as set, but we should keep maybe contacting them back to ask them if they're of their well-beings and whatnot, to check back on them to make sure that they don't suddenly fall ill from their prior COVID-19 infection.
Right, so frequent monitoring would be very important then. Also on the treatment front, Professor Kim, do tell us a bit about the differences in intensive management and general management with regard to care of COVID-19 patients.
Yeah, I think we have two categories: standard management and intensive management. The new indications for standard management group includes age over 60 and people with underlying condition. They used to just belong to an intensive management group. It is because we have more than 9,000 clinics or centers who can make a diagnosis with rapid antigen test, and if it's positive, they can prescribe the medications like Paxlovid and molnupiravir, and people just get the medication, start treatment early in the course, which is very good. So even though you're over 60, you don't have to go all the processes that was needed.
Right, so the protocols have been cut in short then?
Yes.
And how effective would this shift in strategy be to treat those in their 60s and those with pre-existing health conditions?
I would just want to explain what step they went through. If they had a positive results out of rapid antigen test, they have to visit a center or hospitals to confirm COVID-19 with PCR, and it takes time to have the results. And if it's positive, you might need time for arrangement. The transportation is not that easy because you need a specific ambulance to transport positive cases, and you have to call the center and they give you arrangement. And to get the medication takes also time. So you just lose about 2 or 3 days on this process, and some patients might get worse during those times. So private clinics should understand the whole process, the new process, and there's one condition. We can easily prescribe those medications in those 9,000 clinics. If it's not enough, this new strategy will not work out easily. And patients should follow the instructions correctly to be successful.
Right, I see. And Professor Kwok, do share with us some words of advice for COVID-19 patients under the standard care management, especially for those in their 60s and those with pre-existing health conditions.
Well, for the time being, I think people who are above 70 years of age or who are very young in their ages that are without guardians to monitor them are currently suggested to actually go to social distancing facilities and be monitored by the governmental human resources. So in that regard, I guess they are at better hands because somebody would have an eye on them to keep them safe and alive. But for those who aren't, and for those who think that they are being monitored but actually are quite distant from, let's say, the closest point of contact, let's remember that somebody needs to still check on them, whether if it's not from a medical sector, somebody of kin of closeness, such as a family member, should keep contacting them every hour or maybe every 2 hours to check back on them of their well-being. So I think it's important that they keep a certain point of contact that could notify the medical sector immediately in case something happens. But also at the same time, immunity matters. So when we talk about self-containment at homes, we usually imagine a situation where we're just confined in a room, not doing anything, really just self-distancing from everything else. But immunity really matters in this fight against this particular virus. So if you're going through very mild symptom, I think a certain level of activity, and I'm not talking about exercise, but a certain household activity would still be helpful, and also exposure to sunlight and also eating well are very important in maintaining all their immunity levels. So just some of the tips that I can't think of in my head to those who are currently home contained.
Right. And moving forward, Professor Kim, authorities are also looking to scrap rapid antigen tests at screening centres and simply focus on offering PCR tests to those eligible. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, many times I emphasize that the rapid antigen test is meaningful only when it is positive. This morning I had a patient with chronic kidney disease. He's a small child and has to go on dialysis. And about a week ago, his brother was positive with rapid antigen test, but the patient was negative yesterday. So he called us then whether to come or not. I told him just come, and I led him to the emergency room, and then he's on the PCR result right now. But if he's positive and he got the result at home, he needed a special ambulance to transport to hospital. So I had better him stay at hospital. So if you are positive at home, you don't need more PCR. You just can visit the clinic, just as I told you, for prescription. And the health centers may focus more on PCR and other things. I think in USA, there's a financial resource issue. You know, we spent a lot of fund during those 2 years, and I think it's the same situation in Korea, also in the manpower. So I think it's good to move on PCR and other areas to focus on.
Right. Meanwhile, on the vaccination front, Professor Kwok, it appears that Korea's booster uptake has been hovering little changed on the 60% level. What do you suppose can be done to boost it further?
Well, in that regard, I think the government has to come out clear about what's happening with its booster rate and among what age groups are showing higher incidences of infection. As you can clearly see, we saw in the past a few weeks or so a steep rise in the infections among very younger generations. And those happen to be also those ones who are not completely vaccinated at the point. It just makes sense. Obviously, these vaccinations is not going to protect you from getting an infection, but it still works. It still works in the larger numbers. And also, for those who are injected, they clearly clinically show less severity when they are actually infected. So I think the government, whether it is beneficial to their image or not, has to come out clear and show the people what these vaccinations are clearly doing among different groups of generations, among their own death rate, severity rates, and even just in an infection.
Right. Professor Kim, with regard to inoculation, let's imagine that a partially vaccinated person gets COVID-19 before his or her second shot. Should this person receive his or her final shot after recovery?
Well, I wish I can say that if somebody is infected, you are free of vaccination, you don't need anything anymore. I wish I can say that, but it's not that simple. From the commentation from WHO, they say that people who already got COVID-19 have a higher chance to infection compared to people who recovered and had vaccination. So even though you recover from COVID-19, you still need a vaccination because it's about 2.3 times higher to get infected. So we regard that infection as one dose of vaccination. So if you get a first vaccination infected, then you need a booster. And it takes about 3 months after the infection to get the vaccination. I mean, if you get vaccine too early, that vaccine might not be so effective. The antibody remains in the body for 5 to 6 months. So we need more research on the timing of those vaccinations, especially for Omicron. It might have a different picture compared to previous mutants. So we have to wait for that, about the timing, when, and what we're going to do with Omicron.
Right, see. And finally, Professor Kwok, very briefly speaking, for those who have recovered from COVID-19, what are some persisting symptoms that they should be wary of?
Well, the most common symptoms we are currently seeing are those people with lung symptoms, so those with breathlessness. But we're also occasionally seeing people with chest pain. And very commonly, we are seeing patients with fatigue and very tiresome daily activities and so on. So these are what we call long COVID syndromes. And for those people, especially with chest pain or breathlessness, I strongly suggest that they be checked out at a medical center just to make sure that they're not having it in any severe forms of long COVID-19. But most other things, I think, will generally fade away within about 2 months or so.
Right, that is good to know. All right, Professor Kwok, as always, thank you very much for your thoughts. Professor Kim here in the studio, thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, as mentioned quite a number of times on our show, prevention is better than cure. So do seek to make a conscious effort to stay safe. Thank you for watching.